Today we're going to have a go at writing some sentences using commas as part of lists. So to be successful in today's lesson, we're going to see if we can understand the reason why commas are being used. We're going to see if we can write a simple list sentence using commas correctly. And we're going to see if we can up-level our vocabulary choices just to make our work that bit more interesting. So, writing list sentences, they're a good way to introduce a character before going into more detail. So if I was describing about Mr. Twit, for example, I might come up with a list sentence with 2 or 3 things or 3 or 4 things about Mr. Twit, and then I'd go on to explain a bit more detail about him. So we could use 3 or 4 adjectives to describe them as a character. Let's have a think. Here's Mr. Twit. I want to think of 3 or 4 adjectives to describe Mr. Twit, and then we'll go and make it into a sentence. So, I think that Mr. Twit is disgusting. I think that Mr. Twit is probably smelly. And I think that Mr. Twit is evil. So I've said disgusting, smelly, and evil. I'm going to make that into a sentence now using those 3 adjectives. So here we go. It's as simple as this. Mr. Twit is disgusting, smelly, and I can't remember what my last word was now. I'm going to make up a new one. Let's say evil. So Mr. Twit is disgusting, smelly, and evil. So that's my list sentence. My list sentence has got a comma here to show that it's separating 3 things in a list. I've got 1 thing, comma, 2 things, and the 3rd thing. You always have to use and before the last thing instead of using a comma. So if you're using 3 adjectives, you would need comma, and. If you're using 2 adjectives, you'll need just an and. If you're using 4 adjectives, you'll need comma, comma, and. You'd need 2 commas there. So make sure you use the correct amount of commas when you're doing your list sentences. So today, for your task, I'd like to have a go at writing your own list sentences. You'll need to be creative by coming up with your adjectives to describe them. When you're writing your list sentences, I'd like you to do number 1, a description of Mr. Twit, like I just did. Number 2, a description of Mrs. Twit. And then number 3, a list of tricks that they play on each other. We learned about some of their tricks last week. If you can't remember them, you can go back and watch the video from last week, or you could just make them up and see what kind of tricks you think they play on each other. Once you've written those list sentences, come back to this video and have a think about your open. So today's open, the objective was using commas. P&E, presentation and effort, is for you to think about today. And then think about your next step. What could you do to make your learning even better next time? Did you think of a reason why commas are being used? Did you write a simple sentence using commas correctly? Were you able to up-level your vocabulary choices? And maybe we could think about other reasons why commas are used. So we know that commas are used for writing list sentences, but sometimes they're used to separate what's called clauses in the sentence. It shows that you take a breath. It shows that it separates 2 different things in the sentence. I sometimes use commas when I use a conjunction to separate those 2 things as well. So that's another reason why commas might be used. Maybe that could be your next step to learn how to do that.